What were you doing when the Twin Towers fell? Caught the L at the Graham Avenue station maybe a minute after the first plane hit. From that side of the street, all I saw was a large plume of smoke and thought, I bet I'll hear about that fire later. From the other side of the street, I would have seen the towers. Watched the towers fall from Union Square. In social studies class in 7th grade, and someone came in and told us the World Trade Center had been hit by an airplane. I had no clue that was the Twin Towers until they turned the TVs to the news. Getting ready for school. Friend called me saying to look at the news. We ended up watching the news broadcast all day at school because my teacher said it had more historical importance than anything she was going to be teaching that day. I was leaned up against one of those big tree planters outside the Paramount building on Broad 30 blocks from Ground Zero, smoking a cigarette to try and calm down after the second plane hit. I felt the ground shake through the planter and rushed back in to find the first tower had fallen. It was one hell of a day. Sleeping. My dad was a diplomat. On his way to a conference in Geneva. He called us from the airport in Singapore to tell us to turn on the news because there'd been a terrorist attack in America involving passenger flights. He said that he wasn't sure if his flight would still be taking off, but that he loved us and he'd called us when he got to Geneva. I remember it vividly. I was working in telesales for a very well-known, at the time, directory company. One of my colleagues drew everyone's attention to the news of what was unfolding. We were all stood looking at the TV in utter shock. Our manager came storming out of her office shouting and screaming at us to get back in the phones, telling us there was nothing we could do about it and to get back to work. She stood over us to ensure we started calls again. The abuse we rightly got from the companies we called was probably one of the lowest point I've ever had in my working life. My history teacher turned the TV on as we watched the planes fly into the towers. Little did we know we were watching history live. Had a half day of school because the county fair was that week and it was all you could ride. Wristband day. Most of us were pissed because none of our parents would take us to the fair, but we were too young to realize the gravity of the situation on that day. I was 10 at the time, watching TV in Romania. I remember my mom made me this awesome sandwich and I was helping her clean the house in between bites. Then it just came on the news. I don't think we did anything for the rest of that day outside of just staring in horror at the TV. I still remember vividly that one guy who just jumped out of the window to his death. Edit. Thank you for my first award. Also, in 10 days I will become a U.S. citizen. Looking back at that day, that 10-year-old kid would have never imagined moving to the very country he was watching on TV. Stationed in the UK. Had a full base recall. Recalled all aircraft from their sorties. Waited around a few hours for briefings. Then got orders to prep the aircraft ready for deployment. Aircraft were F-15 Strike Eagles. It was a very long day. Edit. I was not a pilot. I worked on them. I was a senior in high school. Third period computer class. They turned on all the TVs in the school and showed the broadcast. They dismissed school at noon. I drove to grandparents and sat at the table with my grandpa watching the news. Me and him drove down about 40 minutes away to look at a car. He bought it for me. We stopped for dinner and we drove home. That was the last time I seen him alive. He passed away that night. I never remember 9/11 as the attack but as the last day with my grandpa. He was a great man. Miss him every day even though it's been 20 years. I'm from Queens, NYC. I was 11 and in 6th grade English class. TBH, I started junior high literally just a week or so before. We were just starting class when another teacher came in and told our teacher about a plane hitting one of the towers. After the second tower and the Pentagon got hit, we ended up moving to the gym and our parents came to pick us up. I remember a lot of crying kids and adults because many of the teachers had spouses who were first responders. My dad came to get me, but my mom was trapped in the city and ended up walking from her job in Manhattan. I think she worked by Union Square back then, into Long Island City in Queens via the 59th Street Bridge. We met up with her somewhere on Northern Boulevard. I think around 31st Street. I don't remember a whole lot of specifics, but I do remember a huge crowd of people walking down Northern Boulevard, and a massive plume of smoke that seemed to cover the sky. It was extra jarring because it was actually a beautiful and clear fall day that day. Something I remember vividly was that a friend of my dad's came to our house later on that day, and he had been near Ground Zero. He had this really shaken expression and was absolutely covered in dust. I really shudder to think about that now that I'm older and I know what all that dust was made from. Just finished failing a college exam and was walking back to my app and thought, at least the weather's nice today. Not a cloud in the sky. Girl I knew came outside to tell me what was happening. No one was watching in my app, but they were listening to the radio for live updates. I was like, guys, this is huge. This is huge. Then I turned on the TV and we saw the second tower fall. To this day, whenever the weather's really nice, that thought crosses my mind. Sleeping. Then my roommate woke me up. "You stepmother is screaming on the answering machine." I woke up, called them and watched TV all day. Have family out there as well. Thankfully they were fine. Hours later my roommate came downstairs after waking up. "What's happened?" I told him, "I think we are at war, but I am not sure with who." It was a bluebird sky of a day. Not a cloud in sight. I was studying in the computer lab at Southwest Texas State's Alkek Library for an art history exam. A girl sitting at a terminal across from me said, "A plane just hit the WTC." She had seen a Yahoo News update. There was no video yet. We all figured it was a small Cessna-type aircraft. We couldn't fathom that it could be a large jetliner. About 15 minutes later I was heading across the quad to class in the old main building. There were TVs set up everywhere with people standing shoulder to shoulder watching. It was about this time the second plane hit, and the gravity of what was happening set in for all of us. Our exam was cancelled. I headed home. I got there in time to watch the first tower fall with my roommate and his girlfriend. I had just visited WTC Building 2 in May of '01. We visited a friend of my father's office on the 102nd floor. The elevator would stop every 20 floors or so, and you would get a glimpse of the activity on that floor. The amount of people present was staggering. The memory of the crowds in that building was front and center while watching those events play out. What the first responders were able to do that day was an honest-to-God miracle. I took a professional certification exam that morning. When my exam began, there were reports of a light aircraft that had hit the World Trade Center and that fire department units were responding. When I came out like 3 hours later, both towers were down and the whole world had changed. I had a day of study leave, and was shopping for clothes at a local market. I got home to find my dad absolutely losing his shit over the news. We're in the UK, and I had next to no idea what the World Trade Center was. I was about 18 and very naive, but realized pretty quickly it was a major deal after that. They had already herded the entire campus into one room and we were watching it on television. When I got to school that morning, my science teacher already had it on TV. And I thought it was related to the paper I had just written on the construction of the towers. My aunt worked across the street from the WTC, and my cousin's teacher told her that her mom was dead. My aunt was not dead, but she had a really freaky story. My uncle, her brother, had just dropped off a whole moving truck filled with furniture around 4 a.m. Eastern Standard Time at the WTC. So he slept through the whole thing and got woke up by coworkers who thought he was dead. They took my aunt off Manhattan by boat. She was surrounded by burn victims. It was my second day of high school. Band practice was canceled. The next day, dust from the towers covered my high school, Northeast NJ, just west of Manhattan, and the sunrise was blood red. I just got back to my dorm after an 8 a.m. calculus class. At the time, my default web page was Yahoo, and the news list had a huge breaking headline about a plane hitting one of the towers. I turned on my TV and within 2 minutes, the live broadcast showed the second plane hitting. My roommate and I sat and talked about how this wasn't just a weird accident. It was obviously terrorists. And shit was going to get crazy, and eventually the first tower fell. Then the second. Classes were canceled the rest of the day, and I distinctly remember the screams from a girl named Cassie just down the hall learning from her mom that her dad was on one of the floors above where the first plane hit and didn't make it out. She left for home the next day and never returned. From the UK. I came home from primary school. My dad was watching the television and told me what had happened. But I was 8 and didn't really understand. My dad was really upset watching the news coverage. I asked to go play out with my friend and remember looking up at a plane in the distance trying to understand what happened.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Aircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.